An Account of the Extraordinary Medicinal Fluid called Aether, by M. Turner, Surgeon. The publisher of the following short account of the Aether, having prepared and successfully made use of it in his private practice for several years, has at length determined to endeavor to extend its utility by thus making it public. As he knows of no one who has ever published its medicinal virtues, or offered it to sale in its perfection, or given the criteria by which they who are unacquainted with it might distinguish the genuine from the spurious. And he doubts not but every candid person who examines it will agree with him that it carries with it the strongest marks of a valuable addition to the materia medica, and therefore ought to lie no longer in obscurity. An Account of the Aether, etc. This truly extraordinary chemical preparation is not a new discovery, having been known and esteemed as a valuable curiosity by many of the greatest chemists and philosophers, both ancient and modern, particularly by Sir Isaac Newton and the Honourable Mr. Boyle, who both mention it in their works, though not by this name. And therefore, before anything is said of its virtues as a medicine, it may not be improper to explain the nature of it, and enumerate a few of its remarkable properties, considered as a curiosity in chemistry, in which light chiefly it has hitherto been viewed by those who have been acquainted with it. It is a kind of ethereal oil, produced by the decomposition of the vinous spirit by means of the vitriolic acid, and differs essentially both from vinous spirits and essential oils in several respects, though it agrees with them in some, as will appear hereafter. But as the vinous spirit may be decomposed by means of all three mineral acids, namely, the vitriolic, the nitrous, and the marine, and as these all act differently on the spirit, they will of course produce three different kinds of ether, which, from the name of the acid employed in making them, are termed marine, nitrous, or vitriolic. The last only is the kind here understood, its properties being more singular and extraordinary, and as an ether more perfect than either of the others. The reason of which seems to be that the vitriolic acid is a much stronger agent on the spirit, and more perfectly decomposes it than either the nitrous or marine. It is the most light, most volatile, and most inflammable of all known liquids. It swims upon the highest rectified spirit of wine as oil does upon water, and flies away so quickly as hardly to wet a hand it is dropped upon, from which properties it probably has obtained its name. It is so readily inflammable as to take fire at the approach of a candle before the flame touches it. Any electrified body will also produce the same effect. It is one of the most powerful solvents known in chemistry. It is neither acid nor alkaline, and therefore is perfectly free from that saline acrimony with which all the common volatile spirits abound. It has a greater affinity with gold than aqua regia has, although it will not dissolve it in the mass, or whilst in its metallic form. But if you add ether to a solution of gold in aqua regia, it presently takes all the gold from its former solvent, keeping it perfectly dissolved and suspended without the least precipitation, and becomes of a yellow color. The ether, thus saturated with the gold, does not mix with the aqua regia, but may readily be separated from it by simple decantation, and thus a true and safe aurum potable is readily prepared for those who want such a medicine. The union of these two substances is very remarkable, one being the heaviest solid body we know, the other the lightest liquid. The ether is remarkably cold when dropped upon the hand, and it affects the thermometer in an extraordinary manner. For if the ball of either a mercurial or spirituous thermometer be immersed in it, the spirit or mercury immediately sinks considerably, though both the ether and the thermometer have stood a sufficient time together to be brought to the temperature of the room before the experiment was made. The thermometers dipped into water or spirit of wine in the same manner suffer not the least alteration. They who choose to see a further account of the singular effects which this curious fluid produces may peruse what Dr. Frobenius, a German chemist, has published concerning it in the Philosophic Transactions for the years 1733 and 1741. But the most valuable qualities of the ether are its medicinal ones, it having been found by repeated experience to be an excellent remedy in most nervous diseases, particularly in fits of all sorts, whether epileptic, convulsive, hysteric, hypochondriac, or paralytic, in habitual headaches, gout, rheumatism, pains in the stomach, windy disorders of the stomach and intestines, whooping cough, asthma, pleuritic pains, and deafness, all which diseases have in a singular manner been removed by it, and that the publisher may contribute all the assistance he can in extending the use of this medicine, the following methods of applying it are given, which have been attended with success. Particular directions for using the ether. In the headache. A fit of the headache is almost instantly removed by applying the ether externally to the forehead, by means of a bit of linen rag in the manner hereafter directed for its external application. Or it may be applied to any other part of the head where the pain lies, being first shaved if necessary. If the pain is violent, a dose of it should be also taken inwardly. In stubborn cases, it will likewise be serviceable to snuff a little of the ether up the nostrils, either alone or mixed with equal parts of lavender water, Hungary water, or brandy. Or it may be more convenient to apply a bit of linen rag wetted with ether up the nostrils. Any of these means, or all of them, must be repeated if the pain is so urgent as to require it. To cure this disorder radically, when it is of long standing, and to prevent its return, the medicine must be taken inwardly for a considerable time every night at bedtime, or in violent cases, every night and morning in a small draught of cold water, according to the general direction for taking it inwardly given page 11. In some particular cases, vomits are very serviceable. A vertigo. A vertigo, giddiness, or swimming in the head will generally be removed by proceeding in the same manner as for the headache. The epilepsy. No disease is more difficult to cure than the epilepsy, or falling sickness. Yet, several instances have occurred where the most violent degrees of it have been cured, even in grown persons, by taking a dose of this medicine regularly every night and morning for a considerable time. The dose must be regulated according to the age of the patient, as mentioned in the general direction, page 11. If a pain is felt in any part of the head, the ether must be applied to that part occasionally, and it must be previously shaved if necessary. It will be proper to give a small dose of tinctura sacra, or of the pill rufi, at proper intervals, as once a week or fortnight. It will also, in most cases, be necessary to give now and then a vomit. If it be suspected that the patient has worms, proper medicines to destroy them ought also to be given. In convulsions. In convulsions, or convulsive disorders, give the ether inwardly, a dose 2-3 times a day, or oftener according to the exigence of the case. And it should also be applied externally to the forehead, or any other part of the head during the fit. If the patient is full of blood, bleeding is necessary, and if costive, a dose of manasena or any gentle laxative or a clyster should be given. Hysteric and hypochondriac disorders. This medicine has excellent effect in hysteric fits, and in all the train of symptoms which hysteric and hypochondriac persons are subject to, such as risings in the throat threatening suffocation, difficult breathing, flutterings and palpitations of the heart, frequent fainting, lowness of spirits, violent pains in the head, languor of the whole body, dullness of the mind and senses, with constant anxieties and inquietude, etc. The dose must be repeated according to the urgency of the symptoms, and the medicine must be continued some time after the complaints disappear to prevent a relapse. It will be serviceable during the use of the ether, especially in cases of costiveness, to take at proper intervals a gentle purge, such as tinctura sacra, pilrufi, rhubarb, or Glauber's salts. Bodily exercise of all sorts contributes greatly to the cure of these complaints, especially riding on horseback. Palsy. In palsies and all paralytic complaints, the patient, if a grown person, must take the quantity of a teaspoonful of the ether every night and morning. The dose must be lessened in young people according to their age. It will also be proper to snuff a little of it up the nostrils once or twice a day, or apply a bit of rag wetted with it up the nostrils. The ether must also be applied externally to the part affected, at least once every day. It should likewise be applied now and then to the forehead or any other part of the head, especially if the tongue, eyes, or any part of the face or head be affected. If the arms or hands are paralytic, the application should be made to the lower and back part of the neck as well as to the part affected. If the disease has seized the thighs, legs, or feet, the application must not only be made to them, but likewise to the backbone at the loins. As this medicine cannot, on account of its volatility and pungency, be properly applied to the whole of a paralytic limb at once, but only to a small part of it, the application therefore may be made sometimes to one part, and sometimes to another, as shall be thought proper. This disease will require a longer or shorter continuance of these means according to the degree of it, and the time it has continued. A vomit should be given and repeated now and then as the patient can bear it. But if vomits seem too fatiguing, a dose of tinctura sacra may be given in their room. Paralytic patients should use as much bodily exercise as possible, and the head, neck, and whole spine, as well as the parts affected, should be frequently rubbed with a hot and dry cloth till they appear red. Gout. This medicine is of singular service in the gout, not only while it continues in the limbs, but particularly when it flies inwards and attacks the head, stomach, or any of the internal parts. In which cases a few doses will not fail to give present relief. It should be taken in the quantity of a teaspoonful 2 or 3 times every day, or oftener if the case be violent, during the gouty fit. It carries off the gouty matter by urine, which it renders very thick and turbid. At any time when there is a necessity to abate the excessive pain in the part affected, the ether may be applied to it externally, according to the method given, page 12. It will be proper to continue taking the ether once or twice a day for some time after the fit is gone, and to begin taking it again about the time of its expected return, by which means, though it may not prevent the return of the fit, which in many cases perhaps ought not to be desired, yet it will shorten its continuance and moderate the pain of it. Rheumatism. In rheumatic complaints, the patient must take a dose of this medicine every night and morning, or oftener if the pains are violent, and it must continue till the disease is removed or longer to prevent a relapse. If the pain is fixed in any particular part, the ether must be applied to it twice a day as directed hereafter. It must be observed that bleeding, very much conduces to the cure of obstinate chronic rheumatisms, must be repeated at proper intervals if necessary, the blood in this disease being generally very sizy. Disorders of the stomach and intestines. This medicine presently cures flatulent colics, removes all windy disorders of the stomach and intestines, and corrects acidities lodged there. It is also found to have excellent effect in correcting that weakness or bad habit of the stomach and intestines which studious persons, such as lead sedentary lives, are particularly subject to, and is attended with sour belchings, heartburn, windy distensions, pain and uneasiness in the stomach and bowels. It must be taken every night and morning, according to the general directions below. Care should be taken to prevent costiveness in these cases, which is best removed by chewing rhubarb or taking it any other way, or by a dose of manna or glauber salts taken occasionally. The ether is an extraordinary diuretic in dropsies. It is an excellent medicine in an asthma and the hiccup, and may be looked on as a specific in that disease of children called the whooping cough, or chin cough. In all which cases it must be taken inwardly, according to the general directions below, and the repetition of the dose must be regulated by the violence of the disease. A dose of it taken at going to bed after drinking too freely has been found to prevent the headache, sickness, etc., which usually follow next morning. It has removed deafness and hardness of hearing by moistening a little cotton with a few drops of it, putting it into the ear and holding the finger for a few minutes over it, at the same time snuffing a few drops of it, mixed with spirit of lavender, up the nostrils, or putting a bit of rag wet with the ether up the nostrils. It has frequently removed a temporary dimness of sight, attended with a swimming or uneasiness in the head, by external application to the forehead, and is a promising medicine in that sort of a blindness called a gutta serena, and in beginning cataracts, in which cases it should be taken inwardly as well as applied to the forehead and up the nostrils. It is likewise found to be of great service in removing pleuritic pains and stitches in the side, by applying it to the affected part in the manner directed for external application. The method of taking the ether inwardly. The general dose for a grown person is a common teaspoonful, and the best vehicle to take it in is a draught of cold water. If it be only stirred in the water with the spoon, and the mixture drank immediately, it strikes the nostrils by its volatility, but may be thought by some as agreeable when so taken as when the two liquors are more intimately mixed by shaking them in a phial, and from thence pouring them into a glass to be drank. For though it has but little smell in this manner, it is more warm to the palate than in the other. The patient may use the way of mixing he likes best, and if he has any objection to water, may take it in any other agreeable cold liquor. Children in the month may take 2 or 3 drops for a dose. Those of a year-old may take 7 or 8 drops. Those of 5 or 6 years old may take from 20 to 25 drops, and so increasing according to their years. Or it may perhaps be better in giving it to children to mix a teaspoonful of ether with a convenient quantity of water and shaking it well. Give at a dose about 1/20th part of this mixture to a child a month old, about 1/8th part to a child 12 or 14 months old, to those about 5 years old 1/3 part of the mixture, half of the mixture to those about 7 years old, and 2/3 of it to those about 14 years old. The method of applying the ether externally. To apply it externally, you must procure a bit of linen rag, of such a dimension as to be conveniently covered by the palm of the hand. Moisten this rag with a little of the ether as it lies upon your palm, and instantly apply it to the part affected, pressing it very close so as to prevent the escape of its fumes, for 2 or 3 minutes, in which time the rag will be found dry and may be taken away. It will be more convenient on some occasions, as in applying it to paralytic parts, rheumatic pains, and the gout, to place the rag upon a piece of soft, thin bladder, and when moistened with the ether, to bind it gently upon the part. A slight redness usually appears upon the part after the application, but it quickly vanishes. But it may sometimes happen, where the skin is very tender and too much ether has been applied to the forehead or within the ears, that it may affect the skin more than the patient chooses, which is avoided by applying a less quantity for the future. This is the secret of a present famous practitioner who, having a method sometimes of concealing his application, is said to cure the headache, fixed rheumatic pains, etc., by the touch of his hand. It is very easy to conceive, from the extreme subtlety of this medicine, that it must produce many excellent effects in such diseases as those above mentioned, as it is converted into vapor by a much less heat than the common animal one, so that being swallowed, it can hardly subsist in any part of the human body under any form but that of an extremely penetrating volatilized vapor, and it is perceptible by its smell as it passes through the pores of the skin several hours after taking, so that its stay in the body is longer and its effects are more durable than might be expected from such a subtle substance. Notwithstanding the extreme subtlety of the ether, it is perfectly innocent and safe to take, as it contains nothing that is acrimonious or corrosive, so that it may be given even to the youngest children without hesitation. It neither purges nor vomits, nor does it increase any of the sensible evacuations except that of urine and sometimes that of sweat if taken in bed. But as it is so distinctly perceived by the smell passing through the cutaneous pores of those who take it, it is probable that it increases insensible perspiration. Another observable property in this medicine is that it does not coagulate or thicken the serum of the blood, but thins it, and therefore has direct contrary effects to all the common spirituous compositions, when either taken inwardly or externally applied, and is essentially different from the most subtilized vinous spirits, for though the spirit of wine is used in making it, yet it is so far decomposed by the process that its nature is entirely changed. In consequence of this quality in the ether, the publisher has successfully dissolved some particular obstinate tumors by applying it to them when other means have failed. This hint he hopes will not pass unnoticed by the gentlemen of the faculty, as it is evident no application whatever can equal it in subtlety and dissolving power. The medicine, so much celebrated in Germany, and so frequently commended and used in practice by the late famous Professor Hoffmann, under the title of his Liquor Mineralis Anodinus, was nearly of the same nature with the ether, but not so powerful, not so highly subtilized. Repeated experience has confirmed the efficacy of this medicine in all the diseases before mentioned, and from the consideration of its uncommon qualities, it may be presumed to be an excellent remedy in many others, if judiciously given. Hence it seems surprising that so valuable an addition to the materia medica as the ether doubtless is, should have been so much neglected or so little known. But the reasons are that the process whereby it was made was kept secret by some who rated the preparation at a very extravagant price, and not sufficiently attended to by others who considered it only as a chemical curiosity, not as a medicine. The chief merit the publisher of this account pretends to is the ascertaining the medicinal virtues of this curious preparation, by several years' experience, and making them more publicly known, the reducing its price, which has hitherto been so extravagant that had its virtues and properties been known, only a small number of the afflicted could have enjoyed the benefit of it, and the bringing to it a greater degree of perfection than any hitherto sold, what he offers being a perfectly rectified vitriolic ether. It may not be improper to give the marks by which good ether may be known. It is perfectly colorless, except it has received some accidental tinge from the cork of the phial in which it has been kept, and so volatile as to strike the nose very powerfully. Its smell is more or less sulphurous, according to the management of some part of the process. Wetting the finger with it, or dropping a little upon the hand, it vanishes instantly and leaves no moisture behind, so that the part scarcely seems to have been wet. Half a dozen drops, dropped together upon a table, will disappear in a few seconds of a minute, and leave only the appearance of a large oily ring behind. But if it leaves the least watery or spirituous moisture, or does not evaporate in much less than a minute, it is not good. The best ether will dissolve in or mix with a certain quantity of water, and that is the best which requires the largest quantity of water to dissolve it. If, therefore, to fix teaspoonsful of water in a small phial, you add one of the ether to be examined, cork up the phial, and shake them very well together, and upon standing a little while some part of the ether appears at top in the form of oil, sufficient to cover the surface of the mixture, it may be pronounced good, provided it also answers in the other methods of trial. And the more appears, the better is the ether. But if none appears, or not enough to cover the surface of the mixture, it was either adulterated or not well rectified. If to this mixture of ether and water you add a little salt of tartar, and any fermentation ensues, the ether was not well rectified. Upon shaking briskly a phial containing ether, if the bubbles, or proof as they are usually called, do not disappear in less time and in larger bubbles than any other liquor, the vinous alcohol perhaps excepted, 'tis not genuine. It is the more necessary to observe these rules of proving the quality of the ether, as the imperfect sorts have been found to disagree with the stomach and produce other bad effects, besides disappointing the patient's expectation. The ether that has the forementioned properties, for there are preparations sold by the same name which are very imperfect imitations of it, is made and sold by M. Turner, surgeon, in Liverpool. The ounce phial, 2 shillings. The half ounce, 1 shilling. The phials are square, the word ether inscribed on one side, and M. Turner on the opposite, and sealed with a lion guardant, etc. Proper abatement will be made to druggists, apothecaries, or the gentlemen of the faculty who use any considerable quantity. To prevent its escape and loss, a small quantity of water is put into each phial, which should be kept with the cork downwards, by which means the ether is prevented by the interposition of the water from evaporating. The end of an account of the extraordinary medicinal fluid called Aether, by M. Turner, surgeon.